I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. Genesis 3:15. Papal States, under the Supreme Pontiff. Seventh Elect Intervention Forces. Operational Detachment Psalm. 75th War Chapter, Verse 10. Sword Team, also known as the Serpent Crushers. Hey guys, welcome to my very first Trench Crusade video. Today we're going to be going over a warband that I've made for New Antioch in the subfaction Papal States Intervention Forces. Today we're going to go through that list and kind of talk about the general composition and strategies that you'd use for it. This warband was made specifically to face the Court of the Seven Headed Serpent. So it's a good list all around, but keep that in mind that this list is designed specifically to counter that faction. Obviously, Trench Crusade is currently still in development. The rulebook is getting updated online very frequently. I think that the most final version of the rules that we'll have will probably be coming around the summer of 2025 when they do deliver the physical rulebooks for the Kickstarter. So until then, take everything in this video kind of with some flexibility, knowing that some rules and some faction details may change in the near future and coming updates to the rules. That being said, I will be including a warband list in the description of this video, and I plan on updating it every time there's a significant change to the rules that impacts this faction and its composition. That being said, if in the far future you watch this video and the video is out of date and also the description list is out of date, please comment with some changes that you would have made or would recommend, or just ask me to update the list in the description or give you some of my thoughts on how the game has changed in the meantime, and I will happily respond. That being said, let's get into it. So first, I would like to look at the subfaction or warband variant as a concept. So the Papal States Intervention Force is a part of New Antioch, but as it says in the description, they operate under the command of the Supreme Pontiff of Rome rather than the Duke of Antioch. These forces are sometimes dispatched to the front lines to perform a specific duty, such as hunting down and eliminating dangerous heretic leaders or recovering artifacts of great spiritual importance. These warbands are typically quite small, but have access to extremely elite soldiers and specialist equipment. They are led by utterly devoted warrior monks and priests, hand-picked by the Pope himself. So, for all intents and purposes, I interpret this subfaction as the closest thing that we have in the game to a special forces team. So when I make a Papal States Intervention Force warband, I think of it as a team that is specifically designed to exploit and counter a particular enemy faction and team. So that being said, when you make your warband under this subfaction, I would heavily recommend to think in those terms. The main list we'll be going over today will be for a one-off battle. Now I know that playing in a campaign imposes certain limitations as well as advantages of increasing glory and Ducat limits for your army. But I think that the main thing you need to think about with this kind of subfaction is the end goal, right? So that's why we're starting off with a one-off battle list to kind of show us the end goal that we're striving for and the counters and strengths that we are handpicking to face the Court of the Seven. That being said, this is compatible with a campaign warband. I would definitely recommend it for that Court of the Seventh faction if you are playing against that in your campaign. But it is a decent warband through and through for pretty much any faction. It's very well balanced, and the strategies that you can use with this warband should be pretty powerful in most circumstances, if not all. So let's take a look at the rules of this warband that differentiate it from the other sub-factions. So as I was saying, this is a specialist force. What that means is that you actually have a lower Ducat limit for one-off battles. You drop from 900 to 700, but your glory point bank increases from, I believe, 9 up to 15. So this is going to give you more access to glory point equipment as well as elite mercenaries that you can add to your warband. These rules also impact your campaign warband at the start. So you will be starting with a 500 Ducat limit, but an increase of glory to an 11 glory bank. Moving on to the rules, we have the Swiss Guard, which is a special trait that you can upgrade your non-elite troopers. It allows you to give them immunity to fear at the cost of 5 Ducat. Very cost-effective buff, especially for your melee units. Very important because the court heavily uses fear in their warband. One of the most unique things about this sub-faction is the Supreme Blessing. One model in your warband may carry a crucifix which was given by the Supreme Pontiff himself. This allows that model to take further actions even if it fails an attempted risky action. If the risky action fails, you are still allowed to continue your turn. It doesn't immediately end your turn. This is incredibly powerful, especially on the right model. Just a little bit of a restriction. You may not have no trench moles. I know that that's usually a very powerful trait to have in other New Antioch sub-factions. But with the Papal Intervention Force, you are able to succeed at very powerful close, middle, and long range when engaging your enemy. And the lack of trench moles, while they are missed, is not a critical debuff to the sub-faction. And then finally, just another flavor. The Papal States Warband must include a Trench Cleric, but does not have to include a Lieutenant. While that may allow certain powerful combinations in the list, being as how I interpret the sub-faction as a very elite-heavy sub-faction, which is pretty unique for New Antioch. Typically, they prefer to trade up with non-elites with an expansive amount of weaponry they can select. This is the closest thing in New Antioch you're going to get to a primarily elite effective warband. So the reason that relates to this is because I would recommend heavily bringing the Lieutenant. He's one of the strongest models you can bring, and with the upgrades that you can have in this faction and the increase of your glory points, he becomes incredibly lethal. So this list does include a Lieutenant. Let's look at the list as a whole. So the end goal, our one-off battle list, includes 8 models. It includes a Lieutenant, a Trench Cleric, 2 heavy mechanized infantry with identical loadouts, a Sniper Priest, who is carrying our Supreme Blessing Crucifix, a Witch Burner, an Observer, and a Communicate Anti-Tank Hunter, and those 3 come from our mercenary rosters. We're allowed to afford that plus 2 pairs of Martyrdom pills because of the extra glory points that we are afforded in the Papal States Intervention Force sub-faction. The next large portion of this video is going to be looking specifically at each one of these models and their equipment and showing you the synergy between them as individuals, inherent in their kit and their loadout, and talking about how to kind of use them in general. So first up is going to be our Lieutenant, call sign Sword 6. So the Lieutenant is an incredibly strong character. He's got +2 ranged and +2 melee dice base as a model, which makes him incredibly lethal in both range attack and in melee. The Lieutenant is tough, so that means that he is going to be a resilient model on your field. And he has the ability on my command, which can allow him to manipulate the action economy of the enemy and use in tandem with your fire teams to basically focus fire and eliminate high value targets on your enemy team while keeping yourself out of danger. In terms of equipment, we'll start with weaponry. Our lieutenant has the automatic rifle. It's one of the best weapons for him and in the new Antioch armory. It allows you to make 2 ranged attacks. So if you are only making ranged attacks with him this turn, it allows you to stack up a lot of blood markers, especially with that +2 ranged dice he has. And also it includes the keyword assault. So that means that if you need to close a gap and make some melee attacks or charge your enemy to get up close and impose that kind of pressure on them, the lieutenant is very good at that. He also is dual wielding swords. The reason I picked swords is because of his +2 ranged dice, +2 melee dice. It allows him to have a higher chance of rolling a critical attack, which with the keyword critical allows you to roll an injury with 2 +2 d6 injury dice. In terms of equipment, first off the bat, we've equipped our lieutenant with our Martyrdom pills. What that means is whenever he sustains an injury, that roll automatically suffers -1 dice until the end of the battle. This is incredibly strong in one-off battles. Not so much campaign battles, but it is essential in one-off battles for your strongest units. You need to protect them as much as you can. It also gives him immunity to fear, so when he does need to go into melee combat, he is not at a disadvantage. The lieutenant is also equipped with machine armor in this warband. Given the rest of the models in this warband, your lieutenant doesn't need quite as much mobility as other warbands where they are more lightly armored. This allows him to sustain a lot of injuries and make him rival some of the more elite heavy hitters of the court. Another thing that I would heavily recommend is bringing a gas mask and a combat helmet on this model. Gas is incredibly common in Court of the Seven Warbands. There are rifles that have gas damage, as well as grenades and other attacks. The gas mask is incredibly powerful because not only does it keep blood markers off your lieutenant, extra blood markers, it also allows any gas attack to suffer -1 dice penalty to all injury rolls. So not only are you not accumulating automatic blood markers, but you are probably taking less damage from gas-based weaponry. In Court of the Seven, blood markers from shrapnel are incredibly common as well from weaponry, as well as the Pit Locust. So I would heavily recommend bringing that to toughen up some of these elite models. Moving on, we'll look at the Trench Cleric. Call sign Prayer of Retribution. The Trench Cleric is technically the leader of your warband, but since we've got a lieutenant, we're going to flavor him so as the leader. The Trench Cleric is also a very strong standalone unit, boasting +1 melee and ranged dice. One thing that's great about the Trench Cleric is the God with Us ability. So at the end of his turn, he is able to bless either himself or a friendly model within 6 inches of him. And we'll go into the strategy of using that in this warband later. Another thing that's important about him, while most of your models are immune to fear, either through their equipment or their Martyrdom pills or the Swiss Guard ability, this is nice to have for just any of those couple models who could be affected by fear. I believe it is only one. It should be the Observer is the only one who I think is affected by fear. Maybe the AT Communicant. We'll look at that later. The Trench Cleric, I have him equipped with the semi-automatic rifle. A great assault weapon. Only 1 attack, but with his +1 range dice, going to be useful. We also have to keep in mind that it's going to be very often that your Trench Cleric will have a blessing marker on himself, and so that will increase his lethality to hit with ranged, but also the keyword assault allows him to be very viable at melee as well, and we once again are bringing dual swords on him. Keyword's critical. +1 base melee dice, and with a blessing marker or 2, you can really increase your chances to get a critical melee combat with the Trench Cleric. Also on the Trench Cleric, we are bringing Martyrdom pills. It brings that incredible -1 dice to all injury rolls against him and giving him immunity to fear. Again, this is incredibly useful, specifically in one-off battles. But in the campaign, if you have a critical battle coming up, I would definitely recommend using these on both him and the lieutenant as needed. On the Trench Cleric, we have Reinforced Armor. Once again, we're trying to basically get the best armor we can for the units that they're allowed to bring, according to the Armory rules. Our Reinforced Armor is going to make this Lieutenant withstand a lot of the small hits, while he is dishing out large hits against the enemy. And as mentioned prior, we're bringing the Gas Mask and the Combat Helmet on our Lieutenant. We want to protect the Lieutenant and the Trench Cleric pretty much as possible. They're pretty much the staple and the bread and butter of this warband, with the rest being, held together by the glue of them, and the rest being specialists that offer many tools to your toolbox. And working together, they can be quite powerful if you know how to use them correctly, which we will cover later. Third on our list is both of our heavy mechanized infantry, call sign, street sweeper, kill team. These guys are as heavy as they come for a non-elite unit in New Antioch. Given the special equipment rules they have, we are able to bring machine armor on both of them to make them quite a bit tankier, just for the cost of 10 extra Ducats. And they also have the ability Strong. This allows them to bring incredibly heavy, hard-hitting weaponry. Looking at the weaponry, we have the heavy shotgun. This is kind of one of the staple weapons to bring in a new Antioch warband, especially this one. It has a incredible +1 dice to attacks and +2 injury dice at short range, which would be under 6 inches. Them being strong allows them to use this weapon without mobility debuff due to the keyword heavy, which is negated by the strong keyword held by the models. The polearm is also brought on our heavy mechanized infantry. Because they have the heavy shotgun, I didn't find it necessary to spend extra money on strong melee for them, because the polearm gives a -1 dice to hit for charging melee attacks from the enemy. So the polearm will dissuade your opponent from just charging in right at you. And the heavy shotgun is essentially a melee weapon in itself. So if you need to take a step away, disengage, you can turn right around and blast them with that heavy shotgun hit. Or if you have to stay in melee because you are afraid of taking an attack of opportunity, the polearm is still a decent weapon for you to hold your ground. Just keeping in mind, the heavy mechanized infantry only has a +0 dice to hit for melee, so their intent is not to be specifically strong melee characters, but right in that sweet spot of 6 to 12 inches, being a hard hitter while also dissuading the enemy from just outright charging them. On top of their cheap machine armor, we also have, again, the combat helmets. These are going to be a strong counter to grenades, as well as pit locusts, who are typically going to be some of the first enemies you fight in a battle, and they're going to probably be engaging this team of heavy mechanized infantry. Also, on top of all of that, we have the Swiss Guard ability equipped to both of these heavy mechanized infantry. This allows our non-elite troopers, at the cost of 5 Ducat each, to become immune to fear, which again is an essential immunity you need against the Court of the Seven Headed Serpent. On to our next model, we have our Sniper Priest, the Cranial Exorcist. This guy is kind of the sleeper unit on your team. Sniper Priests are always incredibly strong, but most people probably won't realize just how deadly this guy is until it's too late. The Sniper Priest, it has an incredible +2 dice to all range attacks. You're going to want to keep him as far away from the enemy as possible with that -1 dice to melee. If you place your models right at deployment and maintain a healthy map control, you should be able to give him enough coverage to where he can stay distant from the enemy pretty much in all situations. The Sniper Priest has a ability which by itself is actually not that great. It's a risky action to aim. If successful, you may add +2 dice to any ranged attack during that activation. The problem with this is it's a risky action, so you would only really use this if you desperately needed to kill a model that turn, or your turn could potentially end. But here's the thing that's great about the Papal State Intervention Forces subfaction. We have this Supreme Blessing ability, which is that crucifix given by the Supreme Pontiff, which allows for an absolutely insane synergy between the aim ability on the Sniper Priest and this item. This allows this model to take further actions if it fails an attempted risky action. So even if you fail your aim ability, you can continue your turn and most likely hit your enemy and apply some blood markers. This allows you to roll for the aim ability pretty much without penalty on your Sniper Priest. That combined with the ability of Absolute Faith, where Sniper Priests cannot have blood markers that they have imposed on them to reduce their ranged hit, allows for a very, very high chance of critical attacks from the Sniper Priest. The Sniper Rifle is why we were bringing the Sniper Rifle. It gives you another dice to hit, and it has the keyword critical. Another additional, if you are able to flex some glory points around your warband or accumulate some more from a campaign, being able to put scope on your Sniper Rifle just increases the long distance lethality of the already incredibly powerful Sniper Rifle. On our Sniper Priest, we also have Reinforced Armor. This is a guy that you're going to keep alive pretty much at all costs. We don't have a lot of the other protective equipment because he should be fairly safe, surrounded by friendly models at all time, and pretty far from the action. But that Reinforced Armor is very helpful for attacks from the Hunter of the Left-Handed Path, or just really distant ranged attacks trying to pick him off from a distance. That will increase your Sniper Priest survivability by a lot. That -2 will. Our next model on the list, we're getting into the mercenaries now. We have the Witchburner call sign Flame Baptist. The Witchburner is an incredibly powerful unit, not necessarily in ranged and melee attacks, but in ability. The Witchburner has reinforced armor, so he's going to be pretty protected by that armor. But the main thing about this guy is he's typically going to be in complete cover and concealment because of his ability, Divine Judgment. This is the only ability / attack in the entire game where you can do consistent damage to enemies without direct line of sight. Looking at it closer, the Witchburner can select any model in the opposing warband within 24 inches. That is typically about half of the length of the map, and bring the judgment of heaven upon them with a litany of condemnation. This is a risky action. So basically, you're going to hide this guy somewhere close to the middle map, as close as you can get without putting them in danger, and you are going to be able to bring down fire from heaven on the enemy as they try to assault or flank your forces. Another thing that makes him so great, particularly against the court of the Seven Headed Serpent, is you get a bonus blood marker on this fire attack against demonic characters, which is about 90% of the court of the Seven Headed Serpent's faction model list. It even affects units that are immune to fire weapons. The Witchburner is also immune to fear, although you're going to want to keep him out of melee combat as much as possible, but if you do find yourself in it, he is not a bad melee model. That's just not where you really want him to be. The Witchburner is not able to dash, which is okay. He's kind of a slow rolling tool in your toolbox that is going to apply pressure on the enemy to expose themselves to try to get rid of them and walk right into your traps and be manipulated by that kind of map control he has, reducing their avenues of approach and the tactics they can employ against you. Looking at his weapon, aside from his ranged ability, you are also able to use his ranged ability through a melee attack. His melee is not too great. He does have a +1 dice to hit, which is nice. And if you do land a melee attack, it will not be able to kill a unit, but you will be able to generate blood markers with his ability Divine Judgment. We are also bringing reinforced armor. It's part of his glory point kit. You can't change the equipment, so he's got some sustainability with that, as well as a combat helmet should he be hit by any grenades or have Pit Locust charge him with their, I believe they have 8 to 12 inches of movement, and they are flying. Our next model on the list is our Anti-Tank Communicate codename Giant Slayer. This guy is incredibly powerful at ranged and also decent at melee. He's got +1 dice on both range and melee attacks. He's got the abilities of strong, being able to carry heavy weapons, and also be mobile. He's got tough, so he is not going to go down instantly. He's going to be a model that poses a problem for the enemy, where they're going to have to draw on a lot of focused fire on this guy, who is hitting them hard and from far away. He's also got the miracle regeneration, so if he takes any chip damage from a range attack or a melee attack, if you can get him to safety, he'll slowly heal himself, which is incredibly powerful because he usually wants to be in your back line. Looking at weapons, he's going to have that anti-material rifle. This is huge. It has +1 dice to injury and the keywords heavy and critical. So if you do land a hit with this thing, especially critical, it is going to do insane amounts of damage. It adds that +1 dice when rolling on the injury chart, and it automatically ignores all armor and effects. A very powerful weapon. This guy's great standalone. He's going to do a lot of damage to the heavy armor that the court brings to the battlefield. Also, according to his equipment rules, he basically comes with 2 trench clubs. They are his hands. He's an expert in unarmed combat and very strong. The dual trench club loadout, while it doesn't have any special modifiers or keywords, is decent melee, especially with a +1 dice to hit. So this is a guy who's pretty tough, can absolutely shred the large elite units that the Court of Seven Headed Serpent is going to try to charge you with, and he can hold his own in melee. He comes with standard armor, so just a little bit of resiliency, not too much, but that's going to be okay because he's going to be typically pretty far away from most of the enemies. And he comes with a combat helmet, which ignores those additional blood markers that I've mentioned before that the court can use against you. Our final model in the one-off list is our Observer, codename Kneebreaker. The Observer is a fast unit having 8 inches of movement and a great stat line of +1 range dice and +2 melee dice. The Observer is a great melee unit. He is allowed to attack twice with his trench polearm at +2 melee dice, as well as having that high level of movement. He's good at charging and also maneuvering around the enemy. The temporal fugue ability he has also imposes a -1 dice to hit, so this guy's going to be pretty slippery for the enemy to both hit and also tie up in melee combat. And when they do, he can hold his own. The Eye of God is a pretty specific ability. You're not going to use it a lot, but it can come in clutch when needed. Essentially, if he fails an action, you may re-roll if you're desperate to secure a kill or get out of somewhere safely. I wouldn't recommend using this a lot, but it can turn the tide of the battle at very critical moments, allowing you to re-roll a dice roll that could impact the outturn of the entire battle. And then finally, something that is very powerful that the Observer has is, as a risky action, the Observer may command any model on the board, friend or a foe, that has not been activated this turn. If successful, that model is compelled by the divine words. The Observer's activation immediately ends and the target's activation begins immediately after. Guys, this is incredibly powerful. This allows an even greater level of action economy manipulation and turn order manipulation for New Antioch, which it is already very strong at. This allows your Observer to force your enemy not to be able to get a downed model up and into cover before it is immediately killed by either selecting a model on the board of your enemies that is way far away, or even activating one of your models who is either in a fire team or not a fire team. Essentially, this allows you to have a 3-man or 2-man fire team as needed. It is an incredible tactical tool to have. And at the beginning of the game, the Observer can definitely allow you to get set up in tactical positions without worry of a powerful spell or weapon hitting you, because you can possibly force an activation on, say, a Praetor or the Hunter of the Left-Hand Path, or the Sorcerer in the Court of the Seven Headed Warband. Typically, those guys are going to be in positions that really limit your movement. They exert an immense amount of map control, and so if you can pop their activation early, it allows you to basically move around as you need that round and get set up for success for the future of the battle. The Observer doesn't actually have a ranged weapon, so I'm not sure why he has +1 range dice. But for now, he's got the polearm. He can attack twice. It's going to impose a -1 dice to hit for chargers, so that he basically will be very strong in melee combat, especially if he isn't the one who initiates it. So this is a guy who's a great harasser and also is going to be putting a lot of pressure on the enemy to move out of cover and safety to eliminate him, because the whole game he's up, he has a large chance to essentially mess up the entire strategy of the enemy. Looking at his equipment beyond weaponry, he's got standard armor, a combat helmet, a gas mask, and a medical kit. So this guy's got okay armor. The combat helmet and the gas mask, as previously mentioned, are very powerful against the court. And the medikit is a nice little weapon to have if you have your observer in the back line, just trying to keep him safe so you can keep manipulating the action economy of the game. He's great to heal some of your long range models that you have. So the medikit is a great secondary role for the observer. He can kind of be a small healer for you while continuing to be a thorn in the side of the enemy. So that concludes the list of our one-off battle models. This is the ideal end goal for this warband, and with a campaign, you're obviously going to shed some fat, but this is pretty much the goal that you're going to be striving for in a campaign. An example of a campaign starting warband, basically stripped as much as possible without having too many unnecessary expenses and allowing you to build up to that one-off list that we're kind of striving for, is going to be here on the screen. I've got a 500 Ducat and 11 Glory starting campaign warband here for you. Here we have the Lieutenant, the Trench Cleric, the Heavy Mechanized Infantry, the Sniper Priest, the Witch Burner, and the Communicate Anti-Tank Hunter. The Martyrdom pills on the Lieutenant are not the best in a campaign setting, so I think of that glory point as kind of a flex glory point. You can save it until you can build up some more to get another mercenary, or you can get some equipment such as the sniper scope or something that you can afford either right off the bat, or you can get Martyrdom pills if you want to really crush the enemy in one of the early battles to accelerate the buildup of equipment and personnel that you have in your warband quicker to get the momentum built up for your campaign. Not much has changed in their equipment. We have basically brought less items, less equipment, stuff that you can easily add on as you get the Ducat down the road. Now we're going to look at a general kind of overview of Fireteam selection and tactics and strategies that you'll use with this warband. The first Fireteam that I would recommend, but keep in mind that as the rules change or you learn your enemy better, this could change as well. I have found great success with my Lieutenant being paired up with a Heavy Mechanized Infantry. They are both incredibly strong models. This is going to be kind of your mid-range to your close-range Fireteam, but the ability to exploit the enemy's action orders with the Lieutenant, as well as having the incredible ranged abilities of the automatic rifle and increase of melee damage with the swords on the Lieutenant, when that is paired with the absolute slugger of a heavy shotgun, you are going to be able to enact the Fireteam Bloodbath rule very commonly for New Antioch, which allows you to basically bloodbath even a standing model if one of the models in your Fireteam has imposed a blood marker during the activation of that Fireteam. This Fireteam's call sign is the Horn Cutters. These are the guys who are going to be protecting kind of your backline, but when the moment is right and the enemy exposes himself or is forced to come out of cover because they're getting burnt from heaven and hit by long range attacks consistently, these are the guys that are going to be your defensive line, and when the enemy kind of walks right into them or you are able to charge with this team, they'll be the spearhead of your warband. They will do incredible damage. Basically, you're going to have your Lieutenant stack on blood markers with that automatic rifle and melee attacks, and then walk that Heavy Mechanized Infantry right in and put around from that heavy shotgun right of the enemy, typically being able to enact Bloodbath with the absolute insane +1 dice to attacks and +2 dice to injuries at short range. And then at the very end of that Fireteam activation, you can try to roll the on my command with the Lieutenant and increase the manipulation of the action economy that the enemy has so that you can really secure a lot of kills, not allowing the enemy that you probably hit very hard and may have somehow survived to get away before you can get another attack or two on him. And then the second fire team that I'd recommend to bring in this faction is going to be the Headhunters. This is probably my favorite part of this list. Using the Trench Cleric and the Sniper Priest with their loadouts in this warband is incredibly powerful. So first, right off the bat, we've discussed how these guys are strong individually. Your Sniper Priest is going to have that sniper rifle. Your Trench Cleric is a good mid-liner and even pretty deadly at melee combat. I'm typically going to keep him in the mid, kind of protecting your Sniper Priest. But the idea is to use the Trench Cleric as a blessing mill for your Sniper Priest. The way this works is simply the Sniper Priest has a base 2 dice to hit, then another +2 dice because of his model ranged characteristic. His weapon also gives him +1 dice to hit. And as we discussed earlier, with the aim ability synergizing with the Supreme Blessing Crucifix given by the Supreme Pontiff, you may get another +2 dice to hit very frequently without the concern of losing your activation for your fire team. This all adds up with the blessing dice that the Trench Cleric is going to be basically consistently applying to the Sniper Priest as much as he can to 8 dice to hit. Now, that seems a bit overkill, right? Well, first of all, this means that your Sniper Priest is always going to be hitting, always going to be stacking blood markers. But it also enables you to have statistically a 40% critical chance, which up to 48 inches, a long range disadvantage, even if you don't have the sniper scope, doesn't even touch the amount of dice to hit you have. A 40% critical chance to hit with the sniper rifle, which if you get a critical with, not only gives you 2 + 2 d6 injury dice, it ignores armor, which is one of the strongest things about the Court of the Seven. And this is not including any blood dice that they may have accrued that turn or throughout the battle. So essentially, this team is incredibly strong, and while there is some dice rolls and statistics that can make it a little bit more consistent or a little bit less consistent, I have found through experience this is an incredibly consistent fire team that will basically snipe things from across the map, no matter if it's the strongest or the weakest unit in the Court of the Seven Warband. Now, let's kind of look at the general tactics and overview of this warband. So a few strengths that you have. First of all, you have great map control. Looking at the bottom of your screen here, you're going to see kind of like the far to near threat value that everyone in our warband has. It's a great example of how balanced this warband is. You've got your Sniper Priest and your AT Communicant in your back line doing insane damage to the enemy from afar, forcing them to have to restrict their movement or rush you into oncoming fire in order to basically get close to deal with these guys in the back line. You also have your Witch Burner and your Trench Cleric strongly holding the mid along with the Lieutenant, the middle ground. And that Witch Burner, while he's not the most strongest, hardest hitting unit, he's one of the best tools in your toolbox because you are able to hide him in many places on the map to limit the movement of the enemy and force pressure on them through constantly being under threat of being burnt for 2 blood markers. So not only is he a blood marker generator, but you are able to use him as a tactical asset that basically is going to continually punish the enemy for being indecisive and or trying to hide behind cover and pick you off. essentially, he is going to force your enemy to have to make risky decisions that will usually cost them with the lineup that you have in this warband. Another thing that you have besides map control and pressure with this warband is synergy. We know that we're well balanced. We have very strong far, mid, and near units, but the way they work together is incredibly powerful. Not only looking at the action economy, right? Having multiple fire teams, being able to move at once, but also being able to force on the enemy warband who's moving, or working in tandem to increase the amount of actions you get before the enemy is able to eliminate one of your units or get away from some of the absolute concentrated firepower that you were pouring down on their elite units. And another thing to think about with this warband is the threat and priority manipulation you can impose on your enemy. Every model in this warband is a unique, critically important piece, and it allows you to basically keep the opponent guessing of what they need to eliminate first, which causes them to consistently have to basically be on the back foot strategically, trying to figure out what unit is going to be the epicenter of your tactics, and causing them, through all of the action economy manipulation, to never really get a tactical foothold against you during the battle. And what I mean by that is you could go very melee heavy. You can charge with the lieutenant and the heavy mechanized infantry and the observer if you need to put a lot of close pressure on them. You can use your long range characters to basically assassinate incredibly powerful units before they can even do anything a couple rounds into the battle. You can use the Witch Burner to basically consistently be a steamrolling map control blood marker generator who's going to force the enemy to have to get out of cover to do something about him and walk right into your ambushes. And you've got the Lieutenant with his action economy manipulation, and also your Trench Cleric, who is going to be a strong standalone character, but also making the entire warband that you have stronger with his blessing markers and immunity to fear. So, as an enemy warband, you roll up on this, and you just have to guess what the staple tactic that this list is going to be using, because it gives you so much flexibility with the incredible strength at mid, long, and close range, as well as the unique abilities and tactics you can employ with this list. The enemy will basically be kept guessing the entire match of what your next plan is, and constantly be having their turn order and their action economy messed with, making them even further incapable of estimating and countering the tactics that you are using in that battle. And that concludes the video going over this list. As I mentioned, I will keep the description updated, and I will be active in the comments section to discuss further tactics and rule changes implications for this list. But thank you for watching. Please leave a like and a comment if you'd like to see more content like this. I'm sure I'll be making more stuff because I've been really enjoying Trench Crusade. I've been playing on Tabletop Simulator, and I have a 3D printer now, so I'll be able to print out those 3D models, which should be released, I believe, over the holidays for those of us who backed the Kickstarter. Thanks again for watching. I will cut off the horns of all the wicked, but the horns of the righteous will be lifted up. Psalm 75:10.